Well, let's get more reaction on the unprecedented capture of the Venezuelan leader and his wife. Joining me for this conversation is anti-apartheid activist and former cabinet minister, former minister of intelligence, in fact, Ronnie Kasrils. Minister, good evening to you, former minister. Thank you very much for your time. Just on the face of it, before we get deeper into the issues, what do you think is at play here? What is the United States aiming to gain?
Well, they're seizing the resources of a country. They're the rogue state. We see the chaos that the US administration brings, Democrat or Republican. Of course, Trump is in excess, and the world is reeling, and even a country like Greenland is in the sights. So, of course, it's an absolute violation of the rule of law, of international law. It's absolutely diabolical, criminal in the excess. And to seize a democratically elected president of a country and his wife to boot and take them off in chains to face a trial about drug smuggling and ownership of guns. I mean, this is the president of a country, and there's never been any shred of evidence about Maduro or Chavez or Venezuela in its revolutionary phase involved in narco smuggling of any kind. We know there are other countries in Latin America, and some now under very fine leadership, such as Colombia and Mexico, who have been entangled in that, despite the leadership of those countries in contemporary terms, who also are being threatened.
Yeah.
So this is a world in which US imperialism, in terms of the agency of a crazed man. We're actually on the 5th anniversary when he was an outgoing president, and he organized his thugs in an attack on Capitol Hill, the Senate and the House of Representatives 5 years ago. He's released all those who were found guilty, but he claims that Maduro is a criminal, and it's absolutely outrageous. And it's outrageous that there are countries in the world, particularly the UK and others, who don't bleat about this. And it's absolutely outrageous that the DA attacks the government of this country for talking about international law and the upholding of sovereignty. What President Ramaphosa has said is 100% correct, and the whole country ought to support him.
Yeah. We'll come back to the politics of it. I'd like for you to wear your former intelligence minister's hat for a moment, because the latest news coming out of America, and I'm quoting here from a BBC website, they are saying that Trump has said, quote unquote, many Cuban soldiers were killed in that Venezuela raid, but nonetheless, he calls this operation, quote unquote, brilliant. And then they also say Cuba itself has said that 32 Cuban nationals died when US elite troops stormed Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores Caracas's compound on Saturday. What do you think the involvement of Cuban nationals was here? Are they some kind of a VIP protection unit of the President Maduro, or were they?
Yes, Khaleesi, we must be very, we must avoid diversions. Trump is the king of diversion. A sovereign country, and Venezuela is an ally of Cuba, has a right to involve or employ or receive volunteers, as, by the way, our close neighbor Angola did in the thousands when Angola needed to defend itself against apartheid racist South Africa's invasion. There's absolutely nothing sinister. This wasn't secret. It's been pretty well known that Cuba has assisted Venezuela from the time of former President Chavez in terms of assistance of all kinds, medical particularly, but also military in terms of its defense, intelligence, because they know the US, and the US has been threatening Venezuela all these years, way back to the Chavez era. So there was a contingent of Cubans working with Venezuelan intelligence and security. And in this illegal attack on Caracas, on Venezuela, on the president's palace, 35 Cubans who were serving there were butchered, along with Venezuelans and along with citizens of Venezuela. So no crime in that. The crime is on the side of US imperialism, the aggressor, and we've seen something like 100 and more since the end of the Second World War, going way back, at least over 100 American or CIA open or underhand interventions around the world to get color change, to regime change, or outright aggression. This is one of the most blatant events we've ever seen, and the world, as is the case with South Africa and elsewhere, should be absolutely up in arms, because other countries are next. And they're not just Colombia and Mexico, who have been cited by Trump himself, but we've seen what's happened with Iran. We've seen the US's support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. We see that South Africa is in the crosshairs, and I respect President Ramaphosa and his excellent exposition, and of course he's got to keep the country calm. But in the world today, America's reach as a declining empire, and empires in decline become extremely aggressive and violent. So as we saw with the attack on Iran a few months back, there's no country that is safe if you don't stand meekly on the side of obedience, not just to US, but to the King Trump. He is the emperor of a declining empire, and this is why, in spite of the very huge harm that America can dish out, their strategy is going nowhere. And people of the world will unite against, and are uniting against, the Americans, the American imperialists. And we're seeing very interesting developments, because there's no more Cold War, communists, terrorists on one side, and America, freedom, democracy on the other, when he's now threatening the very democratic governance over Greenland by Denmark. I mean, can you ask for anything more crazy in terms of that? And those who look at us critically, like the DA, shame on them. They should take cognizance of that. What's the DA going to say when Mr. Trump decides on his next move in relation to a very freedom-loving, open democracy, Western style, which is Danish rule over self-governing Greenland?
We're going to have to...
Actually, it's hilarious, but it's deadly serious, deadly serious.
We'll have to wait and see what is going to be the fate of Greenland. But the leaders from that country, they've really come out strongly to say he needs to stop that kind of talk. Let's get into the politics of it. Maria Machado she was just announced last month, in fact, as the Nobel Prize winner. Anyone who doesn't know who she is, she's one of Venezuela's prominent opposition leaders. She couldn't receive that Nobel Prize because she was in hiding. Why was she in hiding? Because she was running away from the Maduro administration. This is the same administration which is accused of extrajudicial killings against its own people. And to your point earlier about the United Kingdom, its prime minister, who said yesterday that this is why no tears are going to be shed for the state in which Nicolás Maduro and his wife find themselves in today. How do we respond to that? How should we rationalize that?
Okay, look, that's quite a fair question. But at the same time, the lady who received the Nobel Prize, a Peace Prize, she was in hiding because she had been calling on the US of A to invade her country. That's exactly why she was in hiding. Imagine a situation in South Africa similar to that. If we were in such a situation, it's a crime. And she wasn't well known in Venezuela. The Americans, the USA, have provided a string of such people to stand in elections, and they have got nowhere. They come and they go. She was made famous by a committee in Oslo who decided, and this is where we're living in a world that's become perverse, that a woman standing on that kind of platform of calling for an invasion of a country should be given a peace prize. And by the way, a woman who supports Israel's killings in Gaza and its occupation of Palestine. So people must join the dots and see the kind of people that the US has rolled forward. But surprisingly, Trump decided to ignore her in this latest bizarre attack on Venezuela, the abduction of a president, which is one of the worst crimes imaginable. It goes back to Noriega in terms of Panama so many years ago, and the experience of Latin America, of Africa, of Asia, killing of Patrice Lumumba, etc., etc. Why did he do that? Because he can't really take Venezuela with boots on the ground. So there's been some strange things happening. And in the end, and it's too early to call in terms of what's actually happening behind the scenes, he decided to ignore her because I'm sure on the basis of not his intelligence, he's a man utterly without a brain cell, quite frankly, CIA intelligence, who probably have said to him, look, we might spirit Maduro away and we'll put him on trial and we'll find him guilty because Trump's fixing the courts in America. He's absolutely torn the rule of law asunder, as we've seen from the United Nations to everywhere else in the world, including inside his own country and elsewhere. And I think they can't actually roll over Venezuela, and they're probably trying to see whether in terms of this pressure, this blackmail, the threats, the seizure of the oil fields, that they can come to some modus operandi with a replacement. But at least the new interim president has called for Maduro's immediate release, as the ANC in our country has done.
Finally, and very briefly, if you can, President Ramaphosa is asked today whether South Africa should be worried. I'm not going to really go deeper and try and think up an invasion, because frankly, in my mind, it's perhaps a far-fetched idea. But we do know that South Africa has been in the crosshairs of this current US administration. Do we have anything, or should we have anything to worry about?
Look, in all due respect to President Ramaphosa, and he knows far more than me, who am I? I'm a former intelligence minister. I left this game in 2008. I don't have the kind of connections with a president of our country who can see things and know things that I don't know. But you invited me here on the basis that I'm a former intelligence minister, but also I was very involved in the struggle and involved in international solidarity. I do not believe that any country, no matter how far from the USA, whether it's as far as China, whether it's certainly, we see what's happened to Iran and it's the bombings of Iran, that's totally illegal what has happened to Palestine and Latin America. This is Monroe Doctrine, he's revising 1820. Can you imagine? The Americans are determined to rule the world. The US imperialism, that's their US capital, the corporates, the billionaires and the trillionaires, and they won't stop at any.
Oh no. Mr. Kasrils, are you still there? Okay. I think that connection completely bombing out as he was about to give us a very interesting answer, I think. All right. We apologize for that.